All right, so it's going to be a review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's the fifth Indiana Jones movie. I don't think we need this one. I don't think we needed that fourth one, but whatever. We're here. It's directed by James Mangold. He directed Logan and some other things, and I really like Logan. I think that's one of the best superhero movies or comic book movies. So I'm sure this is great, right? I think there was a lot of reshoots and things like that with this. People kind of been talking about it. I think it got really bad reviews. I think it was at like it was at one of like the film festivals or something. But whatever, we'll talk about it. So it starts off with Indiana Jones once again, played by Harrison Ford, and it's in the past. And him and the guy he's with, Basil Shaw, played by Toby Jones, they are going after the Holy Lance, and they've infiltrated a like Nazi camp and they get discovered. Indy gets captured. He's being interrogated, and they find out. Well, the Nazis find out that the lance is actually a fake. So Hitler's hiding away as towards the end of the war. They need to have something to bring to him. So then Mads Mikkelsen, I think it was Dr. Voller, he's like, hey, we can use this other thing. This is real. This is this other artifact, this dial. I don't remember what the name of it was, but it's the dial that they're going after in this movie. And they only have half of it, and if they get the other half, the idea is that you can see fissures in time. So Indy ends up getting loose and saving Basil, and Basil's like, we should take that dial. And so they take it, that half of the dial, and they get away. So then it goes to present day. The moon landing just happened. Indy's alone, and what's it called? Marion left him for reasons that they get into later on, and then also Shia LaBeouf's character, I can't remember his name, the son, he's also not around. So Indy's pretty much alone. Then he meets up with the daughter of Basil, his goddaughter, that is Helena. He calls her Wombat, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and she has a plan to go after the other half of that dial. But Dr. Voller, who is about to get a medal, I guess, from the president, I guess he helped develop the shuttle that they used for the moon landing. He's really after that dial, so he's been chasing after her. So then he ends up also chasing after Indiana Jones, and they have to find the other half of that dial pretty much before he does. So I didn't like this movie. I thought it was generic. I thought it was boring, and I don't think they should have made it at all. But there's still some positives here. We'll get into some things. There are two things that I definitely want to talk about that were not good, but positives. Harrison Ford and Mads Mikkelsen and also Phoebe Waller-Bridge, their performances are pretty great. Like I think they do a good job with what they have. The material is just not all that great. But I will say Indiana Jones and Helena, they do have this antagonistic chemistry that does work. I did like seeing them, and I think that Wombat or Helena, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, she does breathe life to a really boring and repetitive movie with not much life in it. There are also some sequences that I thought were good, specifically the one having to do with that auction, because it's just so chaotic. Helena's there, and her and Indy are getting into it back and forth, and then you got these other people trying to buy the dial at the auction, and they end up pulling out guns, and it turns into a big action sequence and a chase scene. And I thought that was fun. I thought that was the funnest part of the movie. I like chaotic action sequences like that in these kinds of movies. So let's get to the things that didn't work here, which is pretty much everything else. The movie starts off. We can just pretty much start off from the beginning. The movie starts off with the stuff in the past. I think it was in the trailers that they put out. It starts off with the past Indy, and so they did de-age him. And it's probably some of the worst de-aging I've ever seen. And imagine Princess Leia in Rogue One. Imagine Luke Skywalker at the end of Season 2 of Mandalorian. Imagine that. But imagine that goes on for way longer than needed to. And imagine that those people are actually, you have this like deep fake kind of face, and this person is getting into action scenes, full-on action scenes. This is a full sequence, and it looks like shit. It is so uncanny. I mean, I've seen better like deepfakes and things like this on YouTube. Like, I remember Collider, I think they did, I remember they did these deepfakes for George Lucas and Harrison Ford. Those deepfakes that were just supposed to be like funny YouTube videos of them making fun of Star Wars, the newest Star Wars trailer or whatever. That looked far better than this. This is embarrassing. This is a major studio. This is Lucasfilm, Disney. I mean, their incompetence, it blows me away, whether it be with the Star Wars stuff or this stuff, or this, Indiana Jones. It is just, it's baffling. It looks so bad. It's so uncanny. When he's sitting there and he's not moving or talking or looking around, you can kind of get it. It doesn't quite look real, but it looks passable. The minute he starts moving, it looks horrible. It looks I honestly, it's like with the stuff at the end of the Flash, really all through the Flash, but especially the fan service stuff at the end. It's like with that. It's like I don't know if I can accurately say how bad it looks. It's something that you have to see, even though the movie's not good. It's something that you kind of have to see for yourself just to see how bad it looks. It's really bad. But anyway, that aside, the rest of the movie, you do have this back and forth with Indy and Helena, and you have this little boy there too. And I didn't care for that boy, and I didn't think the actor was all that great. But what you have then is you have probably one of the most repetitive movies I've seen in a long time. So they'll be looking up something, trying to figure out things with the dial, or figure out this thing with this book that they die for, or whatever's going on. They'll be figuring things out. And then the villains will pop up, Mads Mikkelsen, and the rest of those like Nazis or whatever. They'll pop up, and then it's almost like they have like fast travel or something, right? Like they always know where they are, and they just pop up constantly over and over again. They'll capture one of them, or they'll have them, guns on them. They'll get away, and then they'll get to the next place, and it'll happen all over again. And this movie is fucking 2.5 hours, and it's that over and over and over again. It's so fucking boring. There are points where the action scenes work, but I'm so bored and uninvested in the dial or anything like that. The dial looks like a fucking cheap prop. And for most of the movie, you don't really know what Mads Mikkelsen is trying to do with it. He just, it can see fissures in time, but we don't really know what that means. It's like, bro, you developed the shuttle that just did the moon landing. Like, why are you spent all these years not caring about the dial before. Why do you care about it so much now? And he doesn't go into real detail of what he wants to do with it. I know he's a Nazi, and I'm sure it has something to do with that, but what is it? And we will get back to that. I'm probably going to spoil it. We'll get back to what happens in the third act with that. But it is just, it's uninteresting. It feels generic. It kind of feels like if you put Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland in this as Nathan Drake and Sully, this could probably be a sequel to that like lame Uncharted movie that came out last year. It kind of does feel like that, right? That movie felt like a generic version of Indiana Jones, and now this feels like that. Like, it's crazy. It's funny how the world works, huh? All right, so this is where we get to a pretty big spoiler. We're gonna talk about the third act. I might put like the spoiler time or whatever in the comments or something. I might put something to say when it starts and ends, but I gotta talk about this third act. So we spend, like I said, the whole movie with Mads Mikkelsen popping up and them wanting to get it. They have to get in water at one point to find the other half, or they have to do a deep. They have to dive into some water or whatever. Antonio Banderas is there to get some book or something. They do these other things to lead into it. You're not invested. It's boring as shit. Because the dial can see fissures, I guess, in time. Apparently, there's like an open area in the clouds, and if you fly into that open area, it's essentially that you can time travel. And this comes out of fucking nowhere. Fissures in time can mean any fucking thing. Up to that point, he might have wanted the dial just to say that he had it, right? Because I didn't know what he wanted it for. So for him to be time traveling is like, what the fuck's going on? So if you fly into it, you go into another time. So he wants to fly into there, so he can go back in the past, and so he can make it so that the Nazis won the war by bombing a certain person, whether it be the president or whatever's going on there. He's going to bomb a certain person because the dial can tell you longitude and latitude of where the fissure's at, and I guess where you'll end up on the Earth when you get through it. And so they go through it, and there's this whole thing where Indiana Jones is like, well, Archimedes, that's the person who made the dial. He didn't know about the continental drift, so it's probably off. So this makes Mads Mikkelsen get scared. He's like, oh, I might not want to go. But then they end up going through it anyway. And they see a war. He's like, oh, we're here. And then it turns out that they're actually in like 214 BC or whatever. Archimedes is actually there. And there's a war going on. There's Romans there. There's ships. And the Romans, they believe that the ship is actually a dragon. And they start shooting spears at it. The Nazis from present day of the movie, they start shooting back down at those Roman soldiers and like hitting them with their fucking blades. It is fucking crazy. It's crazy. It's almost so bad it's good if it wasn't just like poorly written and as ridiculous as it is. It really is almost so bad it's good. So they have that whole thing happen. They defeat Mads Mikkelsen. Those dead Nazis are gonna have their dead bodies just in the past, I guess. And so they go down, and for whatever reason, and this is the part I really didn't like, Indiana Jones really wants to stay back in the past with Archimedes for no reason. He is like hell bent on it. I have no idea why. And so he's arguing with Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Helena, about staying in the past with Archimedes. He's like, no, this is where I need to be. For what? And then so they kind of do say that like it's because he has nothing in the present. So it's like, well, might as well stay here. He has a gunshot wound, and she says they don't have the medical the medicine that you would need to even get better. You're just gonna die here. But for whatever reason, he's hell bent on staying there. So she has to knock him out in order to bring him back. The performances are good. I still like Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones and things like that. And him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Helena, they have a pretty decent dynamic. But the rest of this is just completely boring and uninteresting and repetitive. And when it's not boring, like when it gets to the third act and that crazy shit at the end, it becomes so absolutely ridiculous. It becomes embarrassing. I heard that they were doing reshoots for the ending, and I guess I see why, because it's fucking nonsense. You might actually have fun with it. It's so bad, honestly. And then obviously the stuff at the beginning is trash. It is uncanny valley bullshit. So yeah, this is not a good movie. I could maybe get away with the rental, maybe if it wasn't for the beginning and the end, with those being there and the middle being boring and the movie being way too long and things. I'm gonna give it trash, and it's lucky not to get lower than that. So that's it. That's Indy 5 or Dial of Destiny, whatever. And yeah, subscribe when we're done.